I sort of say that if people don't notice your communications in the first place, you might as well take your money and set it on fire.
Yep. Today I'm having a gas with Sophie Lewis, who is the Chief Strategy Officer here at M&C Saatchi. Not the other one with the same name, which Sophie was happy to see that I knew the distinction when we were in the lift.
Not many people do. Yeah.
No, I imagine, because I'm basically in my first proper job ever, and I have been for 5 years, but before that I was a waiter. And so what happens is you get into it and you think the problems you're facing are the first time anyone's ever faced them.
Yeah.
And so we start kind of having wars with our partners and leadership team. No, this is going to drive people away. This is really bad. I can't imagine what kind of conversations like that were happening when the Saatchi brothers said, you know what, we're just going to set up another agency with the same names. I mean, the Saatchi and Saatchi people must have been going, how are we going to tell the difference people are going to come to?
Yeah. I don't know. I would, it's one of those ones that I would love to have been a fly on the wall. It was funny because I was in a meeting with Murray, who's our group CEO, the other day, and he was actually we were talking about the agency as a whole and where it's going. And he was talking about starting M&C, and they'd sat round, I think in somebody's house, somebody's kitchen, and gone, okay, well, what do we want to be? But yeah, the name is a fascinating thing, I think. I mean, it's also fascinating because, of course, there's Saatchi and M&C Saatchi, but it's the only advertising agency that people not in advertising have ever heard of.
Apart from Sterling Cooper, but a real one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe McCann because of Mad Men.
Yeah,
but
maybe McCann because of Mad Men. And, I mean, I always used to kid myself slightly that people had heard of BBH, but I don't really think they had. It was just because I worked there for a long time and my parents knew what it was.
And everyone knew all the work in the 90s. BBH was cool.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, it was, I don't know if I would say cool, but it was, it produced the best... as far as I was concerned, not that was any work to do with me, but largely, but it was producing the best work consistently.
Yeah, Levi's and Audi always come to mind.
Oh my God, and it was on an epic roll that lasted many years.
And of course, from the Saatchi family tree, because John Hegarty, Sir John, was Saatchi's first art director,
and
wasn't
everybody came from it. It's still, which is a sad thing actually, and now is finally changing. But it is an incredibly small world, and so you sort of meet people and talk to them, and you always sort of go back over there where they've worked and who they've worked with, and there's always somebody in common, and somebody always comes from somewhere. And I think people get their ideas for agencies and how they want agencies to be from being in other places, right? You go somewhere and you go, yeah, okay, this is interesting. I like the way this is working, or I like the way they did that, or I like the way they did whatever. Mm-hmm. And that forms, what happens when you go off and eventually, if you do start your own agency.
That's really, really... that's a very, very topical perspective, because one thing I'm trying to be careful not to do is to harness these discussions into an attempt just to talk about my business. But of course, I only,
feel free, it's
I
fine,
only
don't
know
worry.
my perspective. Yeah, it's like M&C Saatchi brings the audience, and then I can talk about gas. No, none of us were ever in this industry ever.
Yeah.
So set up in 2016, completely blind, and had to learn everything the hard way.
Yeah.
What you just described was that generally people hop about, pick up habits, see what they like, see what they don't like, and try and make a new agency out of all of the best things that they did like. Some of them are tremendously successful. BBH was one. Uncommon appear to be doing pretty well at the moment.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, incredibly well.
And so,
And I think you do. I don't know, over time. And again, I mean, there are people for whom, I don't know, I think that idea of setting up their own thing is in their head for a long time.
Yes.
And what you're doing when you're in other agencies is you're kind of a magpie, and you're going, yeah, I think this works, this doesn't work. And if I were to do that myself, this is how I would do it. That's an interesting thing. I mean, I went from BBH to Mother, and sort of Mother were always the agency who sort of did it differently. I hate doing that, but you know what I mean, doing it differently, and they didn't have account people, and it felt very free. I mean, sometimes to me, that's where I became a strategist. Actually, I'd been an account person at BBH. It felt to me as though it was you were too free. Like, you sort of, at Mother, I always thought you could sort of sink or swim,
right,
and you were left to your own devices, sometimes to a scary extent. Whereas at BBH, there would be a whole raft of people around you holding you up and keeping you afloat and checking that you were sort of okay. And at Mother, you sort of just were sort of thrown in at the deep, certainly back in my day, sort of thrown in and, you made it work or you didn't.
Was Mother founded in 2008 or did I get that wrong?
Oh God, no. They must be more. I mean, I certainly, there was something in the press relatively recently about maybe 20 years or 25 years. So what does that make it? So probably slightly earlier than that.
Maybe 2008. There's no point just me speculating about stuff. Maybe that was when Hermetti and Anna came in.
Oh yeah. You see, they're my. So when I was at Mother, I worked on Boots and mainly Boots, and the creative director was a guy called Damon Collins. And
is that he started his own thing?
He did Joint. Yep. Correct. Oh, you've got your knowledge up fast. He was brilliant, and he ran Boots. He ran it sort of pretty much autonomously. So Robert Saville, one of the founders of Mother, didn't really get involved.
Brilliant.
So Damon sort of did it all, and he kind of did it. He formed my opinion totally of how one should run retail business, because he saw everything. He was involved in everything. And I think it was him really who made me, I don't know, understand what my own views on how you run retail were. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Anna and Hermetti were a placement team. Sorry, I swore. We're probably not supposed to swear.
It's all right, do it as much as you
need
to.
They were on placement. I don't know how long they were a placement team. I mean, now I suspect that wouldn't happen because you can't keep people on placement teams.
This was back in the...
Oh God, I mean, I'm trying to work out what years I was at Mother. Somewhere I have a list because I wrote them all down because they were so many agencies.
This is when London media scene had a reputation for getting people on placement forever.
Yeah, probably. And I think they got paid, but they got paid a tiny amount.
Well, they've made it back now because they're now the ECDs at Wyden Portland.
And they were, and they came and they just hung on in there and they did the work. And Anna was and I used to marvel at them being a husband and wife team, because who wants to work with your husband or wife? I mean, shit.
Sometimes you don't even want to get home to them. But.
Yeah, exactly, quite. And Anna hadn't trained as a creative. She was I think a physiotherapist.
Yep.
And they were just the most delightful team. They worked their asses off, and so I was completely thrilled for them that when they became Uber ECDs or chief creative officers or whatever they were of Mother, and they were delightful to work with. They were just wonderful.
He was Hermetti was one of the first, let's say, I don't know one of the first, but he was a big hitter who I did a Zoom interview with back in lockdown days.
Okay,
and I was
good.
like, it's going to be the big king of advertising. And he was just the sweetest guy. We just talked about America and the UK and The Office and films.
Oh, he's just delightful. They both are completely delightful people.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I mean, again, I haven't seen them for quite a while. I saw Hermetti at a drinks thing a few years pre-lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
It was still delightful, but yeah, no egos, nothing. They were just lovely people who were interested in doing great work.
So let's go back to that thing about the Boots account at Mother. So for one thing that's interesting about that, was a couple of angles. Let's first look at the fact that you said Robert Saville, founder and presumably controlling partner of a huge, very, very successful multi-million pound agency with a huge account. I don't know, do you use words like a AAA brand or something like that? Something that's a big...
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a AAA, but I would just say, I mean, it was a flagship. It's a flagship still brand. A flagship piece of, every agency in London would, however, not just London, right? Beyond London would want to work on Boots, I think.
Of course. And to be able to be the owner and founder and say, it's okay, hands off, you look after that.
Yeah.
That's courageous.
It was pretty clever. I always think, I mean, Robert is an incredibly clever man. And I always thought that the real talent in Mother was the creative hirings that they made.
Yep.
When I arrived, there were a lot of, and I hadn't worked with teams like this before, I don't think really, Brazilians and Scandinavian teams.
Yep.
There was this really, and they seemed to
Fusion
proliferate.
cuisine.
And the Scandinavians were quite weird. And the Brazilians were sort of Brazilian. I mean, I don't want to sort of talk in stereotypes at all, but they thought differently. Their ideas
Hermetti
creatively,
said that. He thought
they
differently
thought differently. Yeah. And it just, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Oh, and the Scandinavians' art direction was like nothing I'd ever seen before. They were just, it wasn't even Scandinavian. It was just incredible.
They saw differently than we do.
They just saw differently and they thought differently. And it was just, it just blew my mind how creative they were and how that perspective just brought different ideas.
Yes.
I mean, and I think the skill in Robert was where he went to find teams and the type of people he brought into the business.
Was there a method, or did he?
I don't know.
Discover?
I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know how he found these teams at all. Actually, at that point, I was just a strategist working on boots, and I just sort of turned up, and I was in a. And Mother's quite. It doesn't actually tout itself around town that much. That's the other thing I thought Robert did incredibly cleverly. It had this total mystique and kind of, air about it of being different, but you didn't know anything about it really. It was like sort of almost impenetrable. Unless you worked there, it was sort of impenetrable, and people thought, "Oh my God, it's so cool."
What are they doing?
I was not very cool when I went there, and probably in a fairly uncool phase of my life, in fact. But and you got there, and it wasn't. People weren't sort of intimidatingly cool, but there were great ideas going on and great thinking, and it really was a place that sort of opened my mind to not just types of ideas, but even the way of work. Like, I loved the fact it was one great big room, and we didn't have off. You got shunted around, and I just loved. I loved that. I thought it was incredibly sensible, I suppose.
Not to be too rigid and linear.
Yeah, and also just to be much freer in how you sat. I was thinking, it's funny, I was thinking about boots, and the other day I was talking about work that I'd worked on, and I was thinking about Peter and Susan, who are now some global whatnots of Mother, global ECDs or something, and they're brilliant. Both. I'm going to say Australian, but I actually think they're from New Zealand, and I hope that they'll probably never listen
We've
to
covered
it, so
both bases.
It won't matter. But they were the team who wrote a film called Here Come the Girls, which was a quite relatively well-known piece of work for Boots. And I remember hearing it, and they came, in those days, they had a tape recorder, one of those portable ones that, I don't know if you know what a tape recorder is.
Oh, yes. I'm old enough to know.
And like that, and they put this tape in, and it was Ernie K. Doe, it was that track. And they pressed play, and then they read the script. And the script, honestly, I don't think it changed at all. It was very, very rare they read this script, and we presented it, and the clients bought it, and we researched it.
You pitch it the same way. You just put the music on and read it.
Played the track, and in research did the same. Played the track, and I will say to everyone, it researched better than any piece of work I've ever researched before or since.
I can testify to that, because when you said Boots, you didn't even tell me the campaign, and the song got stuck in my head.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. And for me, that was an incredible. And I just remember, this tape recorder, and I remember exactly in Mother where we were sitting, and it was phenomenal.
Those kind of campaigns where the song, and particularly the lyrics to the song, are actually integral to the whole thing.
Yeah.
I haven't been on the negotiating end, representing an agency of something that big. Yeah. And I imagine that, how do you play it? Because they're like, you need this song, you need the lyrics for this to work.
I have to admit that that's not a thing that I do myself or have any skill in. But I was thinking about it recently because of old Kate Bush and Stranger Things, and the fact that she said yes.
Yes.
For me, she's one of those another mythical. I didn't get to see her in her last tour. My sister annoyingly got one ticket, and I think I've got twins, and I just had them, so I wasn't really in a state to go to London and probably listen to Kate Bush. But my sister
from Brighton.
Yeah, from Brighton, and
anyway.
and I thought, and she phoned me and she said, I've got a ticket, and I was like, oh, and I honestly thought that she was not telling me the truth, and she had bought me a ticket secretly, and she was going to give it to me for my birthday, which in fact did not materialise. So she had just got one ticket. Anyway, I just think that sort of the Kate Bush, who is notorious, obviously, for not letting her tracks be used on any old shit, and very sensible she is too.
Because now that one use has exploded the whole career.
And she apparently, I read a little thing about, and she was a fan of Stranger Things, or they sent her the episode or whatever, and she went, that'll do. That fine.
Yes.
But I love that. I think the difficulties come, of course they do, when you don't have equity on each side of creative content, right? When something is a brilliant thing and both parties can see it's a brilliant thing, for me, that just becomes I don't know, I imagine from the artist's point of view, they go, yeah, okay, the problems always come, of course, and the money, I imagine, and the negotiation, and the pain of the negotiation comes when there is a discrepancy on the side of the artist, and they go, well, I'm sort of half tempted because you're offering to pay me X amount of money, but actually it's not very good. And I imagine that happens all the time.
And I think the other angle to that is that I think naively people trying to procure music for a campaign or for a film or TV show think that the money alone will do it.
Yeah.
And that's what you were saying about Kate Bush is artistic integrity always came first.
Yeah. And I think that's a mistake that we make a lot. I mean, I always find it interesting in the sort of the process that we go through. Again, it's not a process I go through, but when we take scripts and ideas to directors, of course, what really dictates whether a director is going to do a job or not is how good they fit. I mean, okay, there's money involved, but you know that when there is something brilliant in front of you, you know that a director is going to say, oh my, I want to do that.
If they're worth their salt, they always put the creative product above the budget.
Of course they do, because it's or they have a vision. That's the other thing I think about. I was thinking back to, BBH, interestingly, in this discussion, for me, they were the kings and queens of music. That was the other. I mean, it was.
They sent things to number one, didn't they?
I mean, yeah, all the time. Levi's was, regularly, and I remember I didn't work on it, but they had this brilliant campaign for. Actually, they had was sort of, it was kind of good, but they actually for Lynx, for Axe, they the brief was about choosing a piece of music that would get to number one, and it was a track called that thing that there's a guy who was used to dance to it. I can't remember even what it's called.
Was
I
it
could
the
sing
one
it for you, but I'm not going to sing it for you.
I like to party.
Yes, that one. Yeah. Everybody's else.
Amazing.
Yeah,
and
brilliant track.
We watched that ad a couple of years ago. We were like, they wouldn't be allowed to make that now.
No. I mean, in fact, the whole Lynx effect has slightly sort of, become a little trickier.
Spray it on you and girls will chase after you was the idea.
The best first step in the mating game, or however they described it. But I mean, and that I found that incredibly interesting because I can remember, I wasn't involved in it, but I know that the process was very carefully managed between them and a record company. I think they went to a record company and said, we want to put a track on this piece of music that is going to go to number one. And I thought that approach to certainly a brand like Lynx, Axe was an incredible one.
Yep.
I mean, and then of course it did. And
your radio airplay is still selling at the same time.
And now, I mean, again, I read with interest sort of occasionally bits about how new artists come about and how music promotion. I mean, I know nothing about it. It's not my area of expertise at all, but I do understand that the world is kind of changing in relation to how one makes a hit. I'd call it a record.
Well, we're clearly in a period of chaos at the moment with regards to media channels.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening is people are trying to dupe the model that you were describing there just in social media. So people are always saying to us, how can we make something go viral on TikTok? I was like, unfortunately, you're just not in control of that process anymore.
And I find that really interesting. I mean, I'm a sort of somewhat distant TikToker, I would describe myself as, but there were a couple of bits in lockdown, obviously, that I, along with, however many other millions of people, found incredibly. The one I think of most is a Icelandic band called Deo Fria.
I'm afraid I'm not.
You'll know the song.
Yep.
The song is called Think About Things, and it's the song that everybody did a TikTok to where they just jogged up and down.
Our videographer Chris is nodding away.
I can find it to you and play it. It's an incredible pop track. It really, really is. It's also got a slightly weird video. I don't know why, but I think they're Icelandic.
Yep.
It reminds me a little bit actually of that. We should probably talk about the Ocean Spray thing. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but there's a new ad for Ocean Spray.
Is this yours? Is M&C?
No. It's by an agency now called Orchard, and it's American.
Okay.
And it's the sort of first bit of work under a guy called Dave Colbert's new job.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
was he from Droga?
Correct. Yes. Well worked out. Dave Colbert, he's ex-Mother.
Right.
I knew him at Mother, and he was very good then, and he's since then had an incredible career. Went, I think, to America to Goodby, and then to BBH, and then to Droga, and then now is wound up back in the States working with a guy called Barney Robinson, who used to work on Axe at BBH back in the day. So these things come around, don't they? Very small world. But the bit of work that everybody's talking about this week is this ad for, I think it's Ocean Spray cranberries.
Yep.
They now come in cranberry juice form, jelly form, which the ad is really for because it's an ad about a bunch of people sitting around a table at Thanksgiving. And all that happens in this ad, go away and watch it, you will laugh, is that again, it looks quite weird. It's quite stylized sort of table. The people are incredibly serious. It reminds me a bit of this Icelandic group who I think you pronounce Deo Fria. They're in their facial expressions and what they're wearing. And they're all sitting around this very quite formal looking dining table, all completely still. And then somebody brings in a tray of 3 it's just been dumped out from the can, 3 wobbling jelly versions of this cranberry juice, and it starts wobbling and it wobbles and the people start wobbling and this banging track starts, and I can't remember who the banging track is by. I did look it up, but it's a classic dance track, and that's all that happens. These people then go about wobbling in quite a sort of not a sort of dancey way, just in a bit bonkers, wobbly, random way, and that's the ad.
Right.
And it's quite classic Dave, I would say. I don't think he wrote it. Obviously, he's a creative director, but it's quite American in that sort of absurdist sort of bit weird genre that tends to come out of America. Bit Skittles. Bit sort of
what was it, the Starburst berries and cream thing?
And sort of Taste the Rainbow, where they make those sort of slightly, there are a few brands in the States that make quite odd unusual sort of advertising where
would
they
you
sort
put
of use
Old Spice in that category when they did the big
probably
relaunch?
Old Spice, probably I would, slightly ridiculous.
Maybe you can end with the line, I'm on a horse.
No, I mean a brilliant classic piece of work. So small world and music, I was thinking back to BBH, and I don't think I arrived at BBH, but I started working on Levi's just as they were finishing making an ad which we called Odyssey. I don't know what people call it in the world, probably the one where people run through walls. And it's a brilliant ad. It's probably still, there are 2 from BBH that are my favourite of all time, and both of them are because of the music. It's a classical piece of music.
I had a feeling, was it kind of stringy and agitated?
And there were two classical music tracks. I think there was maybe the director's cut, and the director was Jonathan Glazer.
Yes, of course.
Of course.
I was only talking about him yesterday at TBWA as well.
I mean, this ad. And I think the team were a team called Anton...
Deck.
No, sadly not Deck. Should know this.
Anton Mike.
No, I know Anton Mike as well from my AMV days, who were creative directors at Adam and Eve.
This is just becoming a who do you know shootout for
I
the
know,
audience.
it's really, really annoying. Anyway, whatever, the team, sorry, Anton, whoever your other one is. Anton Gavin.
Anton Gav.
Yeah, I think that's right. Both of them, I think, now working in America, interestingly. And I think the rumour had it, I didn't see the script, but the rumour was that they'd written a script and it just said, there are 2 people and they run through walls.
That's it.
And that was, and the rumour, I mean, that's probably doing it down horribly, but they probably crafted a beautiful thing.
Well, I've seen the storyboards for British Airways Face by Saatchi and Saatchi.
Oh, yeah.
And again, it can be that simple sometimes. I think they sketched it over lunch and was like, I don't know, people put it together like that.
People come together and whatever.
There you go.
Yeah. And then I think, I do think the vision for work can come from anywhere, but often directors bring a thing that nobody could ever have imagined.
Yeah. And also with great commercials, one thing I've become more cognizant of is that I always imagine they just come together seamlessly and they happen. And I read about the making of Guinness Surfer, and it's like a 12-month, there's a pitch, there's a brief, there's a response, and then the thing that apparently Glazer had his head in his hands at the edit suite at one point, it was just like, it's so shit, it's just all shit. And it became the best of all time. Yeah,
I mean, I can imagine, I don't know, I've never worked or had any contact with Jonathan Glazer, but I can imagine he's probably something of a perfectionist and agonizes over every minute detail, which I suspect is part of what makes him, completely brilliant.
Yeah.
But certainly those Surfer and the sort of classic Guinness, again, it's
the snail race is great.
Yeah, sort of amazing tranche, I suppose, of work.
Yeah.
That was both conceived brilliantly, but then executed incredibly. But as you say, these things take, oh my God, I mean, you sort of imagine, my husband works or did work, he looks after our kids, but did work in TV and edits documentaries. And we often compare the amounts of money and amounts of time involved relatively between making, I don't know, whatever it might be, a number of episodes of something to run on TV and a 30-second TV commercial with some degree of hilarity.
Yeah.
But yes, I cannot deny that when a brilliant idea and an extraordinary execution, and then usually a vision for how music often will make a thing.
Yep.
That is an incredible thing, and it happens, for something that sounds quite simple, it happens incredibly infrequely.
Yes.
Which is, we're all in it for that. It's the Holy Grail, isn't it?
Yeah, and you have seen you've seen the transformation in your working life, I imagine. Because the one thing when I'm venturing down a sentence like this one, I'm always trying not to make implications about anyone's age. So I imagine.
Don't worry, I'm 49. I shall be 50 in April. So you make all the comments you like.
Wonderful.
About that.
You're going to throw a big party here at M&C? I hope so.
I would imagine I'll be taking my children to, have a McDonald's or something like that.
Brilliant.
Pretty exciting.
An M&C Donald's.
Yeah.
But the thing you will have seen in your working life, the transformation from when media, and I mean specifically, the actual output, the posters, the tapes, the reels, were expensive to produce and time consuming to ship around.
Yeah.
And thus, trying out music on something, it would have to clear a very, very big sort of taste test before it got anywhere near the edit.
Yeah.
Now you can just download crap from YouTube any old day.
Yeah.
Do you think it's made it harder how much easier it is to get hold of everything and throw it together? And everyone can have Premiere, everyone can have...
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the thing for me that strikes me more and more is that even though everyone can kind of have a go, brilliance is still incredibly tiny. The proportion of brilliance, I think, in any form of content, so in that I'm including film, TV, advertising.
Yep.
I mean, TV maybe has given pathways to people that just didn't exist before. Access points, I suppose, or maybe access to people has been something that's made it, I think interesting collaborations have come about because people have seen things that people have done. And
you can get them on Instagram and direct
message.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And contacts. Like I think old Sharon Horgan and Rob Delaney met on Twitter or so, they went, oh, he's funny, she's funny, and boof, here comes catastrophe. You know what I mean? Those sort of relationships I think have been facilitated, but I don't think that has changed the fact that real brilliance is still incredibly hard to get to.
You think it's just an absolute number that hasn't changed? And now
I don't know. It's really interesting that, isn't it? I mean, at the moment, I just think we're in a TV I still think I'm in a TV heyday. I think the amount, there is, of course, I suppose the amount of money put behind it. I'm currently watching a thing that I think is a Netflix original called Love and Anarchy, which is a Scandinavian thing, which is brilliant. And so I suppose there's the amount of money that is being made available to produce owned content, which I suspect is, very significant.
Yep.
And I guess that is maximising the chances, right?
Yes.
More money into something, more the chances are that you're going to put something brilliant out.
Yeah.
I suppose in advertising terms, that's probably gone the other way, actually, as in budgets become less, production budgets certainly become less because our clients are aware of what
you can do with a shoestring.
With a lot less money. And in some cases, people do that.
Yeah,
right?
well, I didn't realise that we were driving our value down by going around showing people that we can make an 80-piece orchestra in a computer. Oh, great. So you can do it for like 500 quid in no time at all.
Yeah. And it's really, I find that really interesting, the fact that, there are these two sort of, that is an interesting point, right? And I mean, COVID is a really interesting example for me of how in advertising and communications, particularly, people delivered things in very short amounts of time under great pressure.
Yeah.
And I think that was both a brilliant thing, but also a dangerous thing, because of course it does, as you say, it sets a precedent, and it sets expectations, I suppose. And I can't help but think that real brilliant creativity still needs time and space.
Oh yeah,
and proper.
Yes.
I don't know. I want to say. I mean, what I do isn't creative. What I do is try to get to places that creative people can take on to something extraordinary. But I do have a great deal. Of course, I do. Right. The bit I do is really neither here nor there. Right. That doesn't hit the outside world. What gets to the outside world is a brilliant piece of creative work, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I have the utmost respect for the people who are busy trying to get that to be something extraordinary.
Richard Huntington said, I always like to hear the strategist basically saying that we're facilitating space for the creativity to breathe. Because Richard said to me when I had a discussion with him that there's a kind of assumption sometimes amongst clients that you can just sprinkle some expensive brand assets on something and it'll just take off, and it's a more mercurial brew than that.
Yeah. And I think the sort of, well, I don't know, when we've been talking about this and thinking about it a bit recently, when I think it's people, but it's also skills come together in an agency, it's quite weird. This will sound a bit hippy-dippy.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel a bit like magic.
Yeah.
It's incredibly rare.
You couldn't have predicted it.
No, and also I'm not sure you know it when you're in it.
Yes.
I think you perhaps only know it retrospectively.
Yep.
But it is sort of palpable, and it is often about a smallish group of people who have come to know and trust each other, and somehow that combination of people, I don't know, I think it brings about freedom and trust and all those things which allow people to have a go and try things, not worry if it is a load of old rubbish. I mean, I think you have to get through some rubbish
before you make anything good.
Before you get to anything good. Absolutely. And you have to feel able to put ideas out there. I mean, in the end, I think what we do really is we sort of sit around. This will sound really bad to a lot of people. We sit around and we talk about things. Mm-hmm. And then we sit around and watch things and talk about them. And then we sit around and we listen to things and talk about them. And we hope that combination and the decisions that are made through those combinations and conversations are going to get to something extraordinary. That is basically our ambition on a daily basis.
Well, again, it's encouraging to hear C-suite people at major agencies talk about this, because one thing, I think I mentioned Mad Men in every episode of Having a Guest that I do. One thing that I was impressed that they put their finger on, because I don't think it was made by advertisers.
No, he's not an advertiser. I don't think he's ever had any. I can't remember the guy's name. I feel like it's Matthew something. But
I want to say Matthew Weiner, but
I think you're right. I think you're correct. But yes, I don't think he had ever had a advertising role.
In the same way that the Sopranos people probably never were in organised crime. But
no, correct.
And
but he was a mad fanatical researcher. I know that because I read a thing about the costumes and the fact that the women, he wouldn't let them exercise because women in those days didn't have muscles, right?
So they had
to look authentic. So you couldn't have arm muscles and you couldn't look as though you'd been to the gym because those women never
that wasn't the
would
culture.
Have done. Anyway, so I think an obsessive detail, some degree of detail focus.
So that may have got passed into the DNA of Mad Men, because in the final season, and it's in the final episodes, and I think I'm not doing spoilers for anyone who happens to be watching this who hasn't seen it. They put their finger on it when Don arrives at McCann and the creative is led by research. And you can see the slow march of clients and specifically, clients and agency side whose business is measurement and prediction, trying to make that the basis of the business. And people like yourself are putting forward the cases. I know that it's a super expensive business, but it is mercurial. We cannot plan fame.
You can't, no. In the same way that you can't. I mean, I read a brilliant quote I think it was on LinkedIn, which I sort of hate, but anyway, that's a whole other discussion probably, about, I think it was maybe Harvard Business Review talking to Jerry Seinfeld about producing Seinfeld. And he apparently suffered incredible burnout and is a totally detail focused. So all the jokes, everything, he's like in there. I think maybe he has a partner. Maybe, is it Larry David who also, anyway.
Trying to tighten everything
again,
up. Again,
always, fiddling. And it's down to them, right? I don't think they did writers' rooms. I don't know, maybe they did. Whatever, the final detail was them. And he suffered burnout. And this person, maybe it was from Harvard Business Review, maybe it was just quoted, said to him something like, "Oh, couldn't you have been more efficient? And couldn't you have used, could McKinsey have helped you with that?" And he says something like, "A McKinsey creative?" And the person says, "No." And he says, "Well, then no."
Yeah.
And I just think it's funny because, of course, I'm a planner, right? It's part of my job is to prove that this mercurial magic has delivered growth for clients. That's just a fact, right?
Yeah, let's prove the ROI.
We are doing it in order to grow clients, largely to grow clients' businesses.
Yes.
But the bit that I think you can't do that isn't a science is the development of brilliant ideas.
Yes.
And it never ever will be.
And that's where risk comes into it.
Yeah, of course it's a risk. There will never be guarantees.
Yes.
And in fact, if anyone offers you a guarantee, I mean, they're talking sort of kind of nonsense.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And the best clients for me are the ones who will know that is the case, right? And they are buying. I think the best clients with the best agencies are buying this magic, and they are buying a better chance. What they're really buying is a better chance of something absolutely incredible coming out.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah. And I had a good discussion recently. I won't name the person with whom I was talking because they said, I don't want to. I said, "Do you want to do this and have a go?" I said, "No, I don't want to say this on the record because I want to work again."
Oh, God.
They're basically saying that this industry has a fundamental disconnect between clients, what they're buying, and what the talent get into it for.
Yeah.
The clients have become more risk averse recently. They want a 1.2% increase on sales year on year.
Yeah.
And the creatives get into it wanting to play with their huge budgets to make really inventive stuff.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
I mean, it's a really interesting viewpoint. Yes, of course. Clients are under more pressure than ever.
Especially right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yes.
Right now, I mean, I think it's worse already than 2008, which
some goods have gone up 40% since April, haven't they? So
I've personally never seen anything like it. So yes, clients are, and I will probably talk about CMOs and CEOs, are under more pressure than ever.
Yep.
Now, I think this is where you get back to really what is communication for. And we've been talking a lot about this recently, and I sort of say that if people don't notice your communications in the first place, you might as well take your money and set it on fire.
Yep.
Because that's effectively what you're doing, making something that goes out into the world that nobody even notices.
Yep.
And as we know, there's some figure, Guy Bradbury, who works here with me, is of ECD, says it's 86% or something. I've read varying figures which say that is the percentage of communications that is totally missed by everyone in the world.
Yep.
Now, if I'm a client, I'm going, that's pretty bad, isn't it? And if I want to materially affect my business, surely the first thing I'm going to think about is actually getting people to notice the thing that I am spending millions of pounds on.
Yeah.
That seems incredibly sensible to me.
Yes.
That the risk really in the world is that nobody notices what you've done. And therefore their chances of doing anything about what you're suggesting that they do or don't do are precisely none, because they haven't noticed what it is you put out there in the world in the first
This is why
place.
sometimes brands don't mind bad PR, because the only thing worse than being talked about
is no PR. Yeah. I mean, I remember that all that fuss about Corona when we were in coronavirus. I mean, I still merrily drink Corona because it's a perfectly decent Mexican light beer.
Yeah.
But I think there is a serious point here, which is, we are in a business that is about driving commercial success.
Yes.
My personal belief is that creativity is the thing that will drive a better chance of commercial success.
Yes.
I do not believe that putting out, frankly, pap into the world,
but putting it on 1 million screens,
will do anything for anyone.
Yes.
I mean, you can put all the money behind it you like, but if it's still no good, no one's going to pay attention to it. And that's not to say that of course, I'm not a naive person. I know perfectly well that when campaigns go out there, there is money put behind them in all sorts of ways, PR and social and influencer, and they are made more of by the powers we have available to us. But if you don't have something brilliant in the first place, nobody's going to care.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to notice it. And as a CMO or whatever you are, you're wasting your limited, ever more limited budgets.
First of all, you need attention before anything else. And I was reminded of that when earlier we were talking about some of those great ads from the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And like you said, you don't really know you're in a period of greatness until it's over. Because at the time, no one in the late 90s
totally take it for granted as well. I mean, I remember being at BBH and I don't know what I was. I came into advertising quite late, about 25, and I was maybe 27 to 30 something there. And I didn't know that was magic.
People would be looking back at it.
And you don't know. You don't know. You know afterwards, and you're like, shit, that was an incredible period of producing. And I think that's the other thing that clients buy actually is maximizing those chances, but it's also about a level of consistency.
Yes.
So it's not that every agency, of course, will be able to consistently produce incredible work. It's that the likelihood of those people in that place at a particular time working together will be more likely to make brilliant work than going to another place. I mean, you mentioned Uncommon, right? And they are an agency where I go, I don't know what they're doing, but
they're doing it well.
They're doing something right because they're taking, I mean, I'm most impressed by them when they take brands that I consider to have been relatively poor in communications traditionally. I'm going to go out there now and say B&Q.
Yeah.
I did work on it back in the day.
B&Q reminded me of my granddad before, but not Inception.
Yeah, and it was an incredibly old sort of untouched virtually model of communication. It's like, day in, day out, we're going to bang on about, doing up your kitchen or whatever. And, credit both to the client and to Uncommon, that has given us a way of thinking differently about the potential in, DIY.
About like the cynicism that clients don't want to do things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly, I hats off to everyone involved because they have given a kick up the arse to that category.
Yeah.
And again, I think not just to that category, but also to all those categories that sit comfortably slogging away, sort of going, oh God, this is how we do it, and producing largely nothing of any note.
Oh yeah, well, as soon as you fall into a habit, it's not original by definition. And
no.
I think one of the things that was occurring,
car advertising, that's the one we're all waiting for.
Driving down a long road in the countryside.
Well, car advertising has had a number of heydays in the time I've never worked on a car brand actually, but it's had a number of heydays in the time that I've worked on advertising. What we're definitely not in now is a heyday.
There's no Think Small, there's no Lemon, there's
nothing. No,
yeah.
There's nothing really out there. Probably just blowing my chances with any car brands. But anyway,
no,
whatever.
But I'm desperate for another Audi. I think I mentioned this a lot as well. Money, nothing to be ashamed of.
Don't.
Love that.
All-time best.
So
I mean,
funny.
if ever there's a great strategy that I constantly try and revive, it's let's say who we're not for.
Yeah.
It's a hard one, but it is a hard one for clients to buy. But yeah, it's a brilliant piece of work.
It's just so funny. I showed it to my flatmates in 2020, and we watched it like a comedy sketch. We kept replaying it as an advert.
Absolutely
and
brilliant.
That was where I think I was going with that stuff about the end of the late 90s. You know the BBC's mantra, don't you? Inform, educate, entertain.
Yeah.
I feel like at the moment, a lot of people's priorities are in that order, and entertainment is key.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. And it was really interesting. I went to see a thing at ITV the other day, which was it's a brilliant planner there. I don't know what her title is, but she's called Lucy Crotty, and she's just done this incredible piece of research, nothing to do with creative work, but to do with the mood of the nation and how you unite this country that is in a pretty ununified place. And And of course, what people tell, and it's incredibly robust piece of research. They've done quant, and they've split it by Brexiteer, Leavers, Remainers. They've gone to the furthest reaches of the country. It's not me sitting in a little group in Watford. It's proper.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the work, but to do with what people want. Of course, they do it from the point of view of what people want from entertainment. And it doesn't come as a surprise at all to me. I mean, it's a brilliant piece of research and she's absolutely brilliant, but it didn't come as a surprise to me that what people want is a bit of relief, right? They don't want you to play back the misery and the doom. They want you to give them something that makes them feel good.
Yes.
That this is,
yes.
and I think that, I always think that, the idea of, I think you talk about it. I did do a little bit of reading about it. I think you talk about the power of music to move people. Personally, I think that is what communications are there to do.
Yep.
If you move people, you will get them to think differently about whatever it is that you are trying to get them to do. And so I think we do that. You do it with music. We do that with words and pictures and music and whatever we have available to us. But the power to move people is what I think we are here to do. And that is always I think collectively our ambition. I mean, we say creativity changes everything. And I think that is, we try to, I don't know, think about that a lot. But definitely I think we're here to try and move people, especially when, they don't care about us. I mean, music is a thing where people already love music, right? They care about it. They're interested in it. They're waiting for Taylor to drop her latest album, which conveniently she has done for us all. But I love her, by the way. I just think she's, oh God, all-time genius.
Yeah.
But they don't care about us. They don't care about brands. They don't care about advertising. They don't care about agencies like us. What they care about is stuff that they care about.
Yes.
And so our job is to get them to care about the stuff that we are trying to get them to do or stuff that we're getting them to buy.
That's really refreshing again to hear someone so high up and so experienced talking in such straightforward terms because do you know Drayton Bird?
Yes, well, I know of them.
He was for those
him and them.
For those watching at home, he was sort of the right hand man of David Ogilvy when they set up over here, and he's a very, very good writer, very smart chap. And I think he's about 105 years old or something, but he does podcasts every now and again. He's still sharp as a tack, and he just did a big missive on LinkedIn at some point saying, I guarantee you no one thinks about or cares about your brand. So stop all these workshops where you're thinking about what does our brand mean to people? Honestly, nothing. Try and entertain them and sell stuff to them.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely right. There was another interesting, they all come out. It's really interesting the fact that you've raised Mad Men and sort of the principles in it because, I mean, I loved it, of course, loved Dawn. But I don't think the principles have changed. I tend to think that the platforms are different, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got different access points. And some people I remember I've had loads of rows about this, about whether digital is a platform or whether it's, it's made everything different. My view is platforms are different. Mm-hmm. Ways of getting to people are different. Social channels are different. But the fundamentals of what we're trying to do here are exactly the same. So I read this quote by another San Francisco 1950s guy called Howard Gossage, I think. And he said, people don't read ads. They read the stuff they want to read. And sometimes, if you're lucky, that might be an ad.
Yeah.
And I think that principle is just absolutely right. Exactly right. And everything we're trying to do is to just get people, I think, to feel something, to move them, to get them to pay attention in the first place, of course, and notice us in a sea of stuff that, frankly, they're not interested in, but also in their lives, which they're way more interested in than a tube of toothpaste or whatever it is that we're trying to flog them. So, yes, I have perhaps it's fairly basic, but yeah, I'm not sure it's radical, but it is quite simple, and it hasn't changed much, I don't think,
So John Hegarty said exactly that. Practices change, principles remain.
Absolutely right. And everything that largely everything Hegarty says. Sorry, Sir John, I should call him. We always used to call him Hegarty back in the day. I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. And we have to learn to use those things in different ways to move people, to get to them, to get them to pay attention to us. But the principles in the way one operates within them, you have to understand them to use them. But it's the same job.
Yeah,
I think.
There you go. It doesn't really feel like you could have a much more natural, full stop to the conversation. This has been really good. This is, of course, Sophie Lewis, Chief Strategy Officer at M&C Saatchi. Do you do any public speaking engagements? Do you write any books, anything like that?
Oh God, I'm not as grand as anyone else. I'm not big on that. I tend to sort of churn out things which are opinion pieces and on places like LinkedIn and for trade press. But I'm probably more doing it than talking about it type of a person.
Fair enough. So the opposite of Rory Sutherland, with respect to Rory.
Yes, I do always say that and yes, I'm definitely a person who thinks you've kind of got to do it. And I think I'm always in pursuit of the magic.
Yeah.
And frankly, the magic doesn't come from me sitting at home banging out stuff on my computer. The magic comes from, finding the like-minded people and giving it a go.
Oh yeah.
So yes, I'm probably more of a trier than a speaker.
Let's make that the title of the video, Chris, when we do the edit. In Pursuit of Magic, Sophie Lewis, Chief Strategy Officer at M&C Saatchi. This has been really good. It's been one of my favourite conversations because I like it when someone's here to talk and not just here to do a press release for their agency.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I've probably said way too little about M&C. Any
work you're excited about at the moment you want to talk about?
Oh God, loads. I'm incredibly overexcited about. We're just about to put in a brief for LNER, who are a train company, and oh my God, I'm so excited. I can't really say any more than that, but I'm excited because I think the brief's in a really interesting place. And whilst, of course, as I've said, briefs are, there's so much that can go wrong. I feel like it could. It's also one of those ones where we've already started talking about music, interestingly.
This is a rail company.
Yeah,
and
rail
talking about
company.
briefs, I've got brief encounter in my head.
Yeah, they run from London to Edinburgh. So it's that part of the country.
London to Edinburgh, LNER.
LNER, there you are. And they're a rail company. And we're just about to get going on a brief for them. So that's quite exciting. But yes, again, now I've said that, I've probably cursed it. I'm slightly superstitious as well. But
this has been really good. I really would like to come back and do this again because good conversation is always a worthwhile thing, irrespective of whatever's happening around it. So thank you, Sophie.
Thanks for having me. Totally enjoyed it.